Hey, over in my Discord server, we recently finished our second ever mapping competition. The competition was called the Assembly Line Competition, and the mappers had to make a map set in an aperture factory. The factory must be themed around one specific element, such as cubes, turrets, panels, or gels. The map should show the complete process of the development of this element, from raw materials to processing and to testing. Mappers had free range for any decisions outside of this, so any characters used and the area of aperture picked was all up to them. So a map that might fit this description would be my map, Portal Plus Chapter 5 Part 4. It's a map I made 2 years ago where you and Wheatley are traversing through this test chamber factory. You see rocks from mining being transported, fresh panels being built, and eventually a whole test chamber constructed around you. I think it's a fun little experience, and this was the kind of thing I was looking for. So how did the mappers do? Well, before we look into that, first I want to explain how the maps will be ranked, or more accurately how they won't be. The mappers won't be ranked first, second and third. Instead, I'll be giving each map an individual award. Here are the awards for the competition. Most faithful to the brief. This one is for the mapper that followed the brief the closest. While some have strayed a bit, perhaps skipping over some major development of this element, this mapper stayed closest to the brief. Most improved. This award is for the mapper who has been in a previous competition and whose mapping skills have improved the most since their last submission. Best story. This award is for the mapper who created the best custom story. Out of all the stories, theirs is the most cohesive and gets you the most invested. Best environments. This one is for the mapper who made the best environments, which covers both visual and sound design. This is for the most immersive and detailed map, showcasing brilliant hammer skills. And last, best all round. This is for the mapper who created the most cohesive and complete overall experience. Maybe not the best visuals or best story, but it still succeeds where those fail. We'll begin with the top of the list. The map most faithful to the brief is Cutting Corners by Mech. This map is focused on the creation of white portal panels for test chambers. It starts off in a vac tube, which is a pretty unique way to start a map, although it is quite short and also lacks any sounds. You then land in this starting area, presumably because this pipe is broken, although it's not clear if this is an intentional design and we are brought here by someone, or if this is just a broken pipe. We see some doors which have coloured NV sprite lights to indicate whether or not they can open, which is good for letting a player know at a glance before they approach the door. If we go out the door that opens, we can see this conveyor area where white gel is dropping from pipes and filling up these panel molds. Then they're moved along into the next section. They've used a brush that moves up to show liquid rising, which I think is a clever little effect. Although the conveyor is wrong, they aren't supposed to have gaps between the segments. It should be one continuous line. Whether this is because the mapper had difficulty setting that up, or if they just didn't consider it, I'm not sure. I do like the little overlook area, and the monitors being attached to this metal truss is a good use of applying an extra purpose of a structural decoration. The room also features both thick fog and many obstructions through catwalk and pillars to stop you from seeing any floor or ceiling, which is good for making the area feel bigger. Looking around, you can also see some dynamic features like cubes and gel moving through all the pipes, which all helps to make this place feel much more alive. Although there are a few critiques I have. This area and this map in general tend to use very cuboid shaped rooms, which is generally bad for creating large captivating vistas, as it makes the map feel less immersive, as you usually won't find real life factories looking like that. They also have some fairly simple lighting in this area. It's not exclusively white lighting, but it does use predominantly white lighting, and I don't see any examples of light spots or projector textures that are being used to create any shadows. Whether a projector texture by the light outside, it could have been used to create shadows going through this window here, which would look much better than just leaving everything equally bright in this area. Another issue is that there isn't really much there for sound design in this section. There isn't any soundscape playing, and the only sound that you can hear is the gel. It would have been nice to have some conveyor sounds and vac tube sounds, as well as other ambient factory sounds, as that would really improve the atmosphere of this map. Continuing forward, we enter this larger area, which feels strikingly different to the last one. Firstly, the fog seems to be noticeably thicker, although it's less likely a different fog, and it's more likely this larger area reveals the fog's thickness more. And we can see more use of sprites and the lights, which are a bit of a strange case here, as they seem to be almost invisible when you approach, but when hidden in the fog they look so visible it feels unnatural. They seem to use too low a geometry size, as you see them flickering behind catwalks, and I feel like they're almost too strong, like the glow needs to be less strong, as currently they really draw attention in an unnatural way, when I feel it would have worked better if they blended in more. Besides that, this area also features some more vac tubes, which I'll say is another nice touch. Another feature of this room is when you enter, you start hearing these loud mechanical sounds. It isn't immediately clear what is making these noises, so it does feel quite random, but if you look down you can see this floor being assembled by this robot arm. I will say it's a feature that definitely fits in this sort of map, although it has a few issues. Firstly, as I mentioned, it feels a bit random and confusing to hear those noises as you walk into the room. It would be better if it was positioned so that you see it before you hear it. Or if the noises weren't as loud, maybe you could hear it quietly in the distance and you draw closer to its noises until then you see it after turning the corner. Another issue I have is that for Aperture standards, only using one arm here feels very inefficient, especially at the speed it's moving. Like if you want to just watch the whole thing, you'll be waiting quite a while for it to finish. Like if you take the sequence from Portal 2, which I would say is quite similar, it's also assembling a floor using robot arms, and this whole sequence feels extremely dynamic and alive, and for a much larger floor it still finishes much faster, so I feel it would work way better if the approach was done closer to this. And another critique I have is that it doesn't actually serve much purpose beyond being a thematic backdrop. Maybe the portal panels it assembles could have been used in a portal related puzzle, or the floor could have been used to traverse across a gap as it moves along a track, but instead we're able to walk past it without ever knowing it was there. But if you do wait long enough you can see the floor be completed and it's moved along a path, although you can't follow it. Moving on, we have to continue further until we reach this corridor, where we get this surprise.
We did it! I'm in control of the whole facility now!
I'll admit, that's quite a well done sequence. The ceiling quickly opening up and Wheatley's screen dropping in like that and blocking our path feels straight out of the games. Plus this introduces us to the story. It seems this takes place shortly after Wheatley's takeover and we've since gone missing and he's found us in this factory. Although with some portals we're able to reach the other side anyway, this doesn't break the game or anything, but it does feel a bit unintended, so maybe a different wall type should have been used. But we are able to see that the unreachable area does have a surprising amount of detail for something that you're not really supposed to get to. But anyway, we're then pulled up into a pipe and we fade to black. Things go silent for a few seconds, then we hear glass shatter. We fade back in below a broken back tube in a new part of the factory. Now it's a simple effect, but it does work. We can easily infer we were travelling in the pipe and the pipe broke despite not seeing it. As it is, it could have been further improved with extra sound effects such as the wind of the vac tube or the sound of the player's body hitting the floor. A sequence like this could actually be doable in Hammer as well. You can get particles for the glass breaking, you could use move linears and rotating brushes for moving the pipes. I've done something similar in my Portal Plus series with this vac tube ride, where it collapses at the end. But anyway, let's look at this new section. Visually, I'd say it's probably one of the more simpler areas of the map. It feels like the amount of detail has been reduced. There are much fewer vac tubes and catwalks, and the vac tube present isn't even active. And once again, the room feels like everything is made of cuboid shapes. But let's look at the main content of the room. The area appears to be for testing the quality of the panels by shooting the panels with a laser. Below the track we can see the panels that got rejected, although we never actually see any panels get rejected, just the ones already on the floor. And looking over the edge we can see this massive pile of panels, which feels quite comedic, whether intended or not. Personally, I disagree that panels would be discarded like this. It's incredibly wasteful and it would make more sense for the bad panels to be dropped into a grinder, and maybe part of the puzzle for this section could be trying to deactivate the grinder. But looking over to the laser, we can see another track of panels following a path on the other side. However, we can see the laser go right through the pinchers holding the panels and they are unaffected. It looks as if these panels should be getting cut in half. It would be better to move these so that they don't overlap with the laser, as right now it breaks some immersion. Anyway, the goal here is to fling yourself over to the other side and then power this laser catcher to progress. Then we reach the end of the map. Overall, the map has some fairly basic environments. There's a bit of a puzzle at the end, although most of the map is just walking around. There are some standout moments like Wheatley's appearance, which I felt worked pretty well. They do stay on theme throughout the map. We see Jal filling up the molds of the panels be assembled by robot arms, and at the end we see panels being tested, and we also get an opportunity to use them in the final puzzle. All that said, that is why Cutting Corners gets the award for the most faithful to the brief. Next up we have the map with the most improved mapping, which goes to Franken Mess by Ariana. This map is themed around the creation of cubes, although they unfortunately don't have a huge presence, but let's look into it either way. This map also starts in a vacuum, and here we land in some behind the scenes style hallways. These hallways generally have some nice lighting and it does show off a variation of room styles. They don't all look the same. There is some nice detailing present too, although they have used this shiny texture for the frames. Personally, I dislike this texture as to me it looks a bit cheap and out of place. Personally, I like using the no specular version of this texture. There has been some consideration for sound design. We have some factory ambience and we can hear the sounds of a fan in one of these rooms. although we can also hear the upcoming test chamber. Generally this is something you want to avoid as it's quite distracting. Unfortunately this section doesn't serve much purpose in the map, not for gameplay nor the story. All we do is walk around and open a door. And this doesn't actually set up anything for the map. This would have been a great spot to show some pieces of metal being moved along a conveyor as the first step in the cube's creation. Maybe combined with a simple find the button style puzzle. But moving on, we progress through this section and end up in a test chamber. Now test chambers were not a requirement for this competition as I'm looking for good factories, but we did end up with multiple entries using them anyway, and their inclusion can be useful for showing off the central element of a map, which this one would seem to be cubes. Although it could equally be the fizzler or portal gun, so it would have been nice to see more attention given to the cube, maybe a second button for once you unlocked the portal gun, or if there was a second cube in play. The puzzle itself is fairly simple, using a similar idea to the portal carousel, and once you have the portal gun you can progress through a broken window. Solving the puzzle also starts a conversation between GLaDOS and the player, who is Atlas. Whilst the story is not made super clear, I assume mainly due to limited dialogue options, I believe that the story is essentially something has gone wrong in a factory and GLaDOS is sending Atlas to fix it. Anyway, you leave through the observation room and enter into the office section, which similarly to the start has some decent variation. A few nice examples of lighting, some nice but basic detailing, and here we do actually have a find the button style puzzle, which also gives us something to do here. Then we enter this catwalk area, which is very dark, which is generally where you don't want to use those shiny textures. Then we enter the first main part of the factory, which is also quite dark. Unfortunately, I'm not really sure what the purpose of this room is. Franken cubes are coming out from one side of the room, getting scanned, then moved out to the other side of the room. I'm not sure why there are Franken cubes here at all, unless that's the problem with the factory, although I'm having to make a few assumptions to reach there. Also, the conveyor, like the one in the last map, is incorrect, being segmented rather than one continuous line. But moving into the other room, and we have the factory, which unfortunately in my opinion is where the map really falls apart. To start, I will compliment the use of a fan and the massive dramatic shadows it creates, although that is something we've already seen in this map. But let's look at what this room is really focused on. We have some bombs which we need to use to destroy various things around the room, which we need to do in order to flick some levers, which seem to do nothing really, and the bulk of the gameplay is trying to find where on earth you have to shoot the portal, because they've been placed in these really tricky to spot locations. And there's also this frustrating bit where you have to activate a bomb while moving through the portal it's shooting through, to quickly redirect the bombs to another portal to break open this window. All of this needs to be done in quite a tight time frame, and also with avoiding the bombs, otherwise you might get flung off the map. And once completing the map by flicking all levers, GLaDOS blows you up like in the co-op campaign. Anyway, looking at the actual factory part of this, so a cube drops into this conveyor, then it goes into this machine, which I would say looks quite poor. The shape is unusual and it doesn't really look like a machine, more like a weird tunnel, and it looks way too heavy to be supported by just the conveyor. Anyway, back to the process. A thing then drops into the machine. I'm sorry, I have no idea how to describe this better than a thing. Then somehow that means the cube is now missing a chunk, then into the next machine one turret drops in, and then two turrets are crushed inside the cube. Why does this factory exist? I don't know. Are we fixing it or destroying it? Again, unclear. Now I do want to mention that the map of this told us that they lost their original files for this competition a month into it, so they only had half the time as everyone else. So I imagine it's things like this that were impacted the most, and the bulk of that time seems like it was spent in the very first few sections. But I would encourage the mapper to go through more testing before committing to a design next time, and getting feedback from other people during creation can really help, and also asking if they can understand what's going on without your input. Also, as a side note, this map features this room behind the door at the end, although there doesn't seem to be any way to open it, so I'm wondering whether this was a cut ending or if I missed a secret ending. I'm not sure. Anyway, this mapper featured in my last competition. One of my main critiques was repetition of the office style rooms present there, and I feel they definitely listened. Even just this starting section, whilst they all feel like they're in the same style, these rooms are not the same at all, and this continues throughout the map, showing lots of variation consistently, although this is occasionally let down by some areas that feel a bit more rushed. I'd also say that the lighting technique has improved too, so that's why Franken Mess gets the award for the most improved mapping. Next, the map with the best story goes to the Old Assembly by Elion. The theme for this map is the creation of arm panels. In this map we're shown various stages of this, and explore a decent variety of environments. But the most unique thing about this map is its story, mainly because this map is voice acted and features 2 new characters. We're not actually told their names, so I'll have to refer to them as good guy and bad guy. But the map starts in this dark concrete behind the scenes area. I think whilst decoration and shape is fairly simple, I'd say the lighting here is actually quite strong. The mapper uses a variety of lighting entities like sprites, dust particles, light spots, and we see variation in colour, with the contrasting colour being used to draw attention. I like how they kept the ceiling dark and focused on lighting the floor. It makes the environment feel much darker without actually sacrificing visibility. I can see that they have all-terrain light maps, which is good for nice shadows, although there are a few locations where textures have abrupt light map changes, resulting in one face having very sharp shadows and another looking completely different. I would also point out how sprites tend to disappear whilst the light source is still visible on the screen, which produces an odd distracting effect. I would suggest always making sure that the geometry size of the sprite should at least reach the furthest edge of the light source. Anyway, good guy tells us this.
Alright, we are almost there. There's a transportation hub on the other side of this factory. Get there and I'll send you straight to the central core. But the main thing is that we are safe here. This part of the complex was built back in the late 80s. He doesn't have full control here.
Honestly, for a workshop map, this has a surprising amount going for it. We're clearly thrown into the middle of the story, and we've been travelling through Aperture with good guy helping us. And the line even feels believable for something that would be said at this point in the story. It's not just expositing stuff that the player character would necessarily already know. In fact, the line is even withholding information and drip feeding it to us, through the line saying he can't control this part of the facility. So we can infer we have an antagonist working against us who we are trying to hide from, although we're yet to learn much about him. This works well for building both suspense and mystery for the player, whilst remaining mostly believable dialogue. Now I will say it's not perfect, particularly the voice acting itself. Obviously storytelling and voice acting isn't what this channel is about, so take what I say with a grain of salt, but I can tell that effort is being put into the voice acting. The words are generally said quite clearly and there is emphasis being placed on certain words, and there are mild changes or turns throughout the dialogue, but it does still have a feel that doesn't quite sit right. Perhaps someone more knowledgeable on this topic than me could critique it better, but I think that the delivery is lacking some needed emotion, and the rhythm of the delivery does sound a little too much like it's been read from a script. But carrying on with the map, we progress into an office area, which I feel is slightly worse in the quality than the other area. The shape is even simpler and the decorations feel a bit bare bones, and the lighting is less polished than in the other room. For instance, the shadows that should be from the desks are almost non-existent. Progressing outside, we begin our journey through the factory. Beneath us we can see various metal panels moving across the conveyor. Again, the room is fairly simplistic, the shape is very cuboid, the decoration is fairly minimal, but the lighting is generally alright. Although the fake volumetric lighting on this light here does look a bit odd with this hard cut. Whenever I want to make this effect, I only use point spotlight, and I tend to use less opaque settings to avoid it looking fake. It blends much better with the environment if it's transparent. Now I'm going to talk about visuals much less from now on. It's mostly the same sort of thing, but I will highlight certain things when they stand out for any reason. Also, if you look at the metal conveyor, you can see a metal panel keeps appearing in the centre for a split second, then vanishing. I imagine something to do with how they're spawning, being spawned in the room rather than somewhere the player can't see. We also have good guy tell us this.
By the way, since there's not much to do while you're walking through the factory, I'll give you a little tour if you don't mind.
To me this feels a little odd. It kind of just feels like tonal whiplash. Almost like they suddenly don't view their task or bad guy as that serious. Which I suppose might be the case, we don't have the full picture yet, but knowing the rest of the map, I'd say it's a minor contradiction. Moving forward, we can view the construction process of the arm panel, seeing the metal panel from earlier go into a box and come out an arm panel. Personally, I feel this is too fast with not much happening. I definitely understand that these mappers weren't going to be making bespoke animations to show the construction of these arm panels. That would be a ridiculous expectation, but to take an example from my own map, here in Paul Plus Chapter 5 Part 4, I have this unfinished button move into this box here. It spews sparks for a few seconds, then comes out a finished button. It's slower, it has some extra effects, and it clearly conveys the construction. So using exactly this, which is very simple to set up, would go a long way in improving a sequence like that. Next we continue traversing through the map. We come across this random custom fizzler. I don't really know why it's here. When I first saw it I thought it meant this door was important, but no. Then we move into an office, which is surprisingly much better than the other office, with a huge amount more details from boxes, papers on the floor and a leaking pipe. I'm not really sure why this one got special treatment and the other one got rushed, but it does at least show the mapper is capable of stronger environments, even if they didn't apply that effort to the whole map. But moving on, we have to solve a puzzle with a laser, where good guy gets involved and delivers a cube to the player. I ended up wandering around for a good minute or two figuring out where to place my portal, until eventually I went back to the nice office area. Can't say I'm used to portaling on yellow walls, but sure. Could have been good if this was established earlier on with some more obvious way, or given that you have custom lines, you could have good guys say, "Hey, I see that you're taking a while, I think that those walls in the office should be portalable." In the same area, we can also look out the window and see the final stage in the construction of the arm panel, which is a neat little effect, and I appreciate the spark as the two parts attach. Continuing forward, we enter this area where we have to reach this big wall of panels. After doing so, good guy tweaks the panels to throw us about and lands us in this new area. I do appreciate all the use of panels, from the panels being used as catapults and them opening the wall. The map does feel like it's considering panels every step of the way and does stay on theme. Then we enter this new area, which I feel could work a lot better if this water wasn't bright brown. And the good guy then says this:
Well, let's go back to the part of the facility that's trying to kill us.
Which personally I think the delivery on this line sounds more like mildly annoyed than actually worried, but moving on, we are introduced to the bad guy.
Well, it's you again. I'm not in the mood for monologues right now, so let's finish this quickly. Good luck.
So there is a lot to say on this one. Firstly, it's a bit of a shame that it's clearly the same voice edited to sound more robotic. Then we have the fact that the villain says well as soon as they catch you, which is very on the nose. And then after capturing you and starting the neurotoxin, rather than leaving you locked in the room, he opens the door and wishes you luck. Seems like very strange behaviour. Would make more sense if good guy intervened and forced the door open. But anyway, we then follow an escape sequence, portaling around the place while bad guy attempts, very poorly, to kill us. So maybe good guy not taking him seriously actually makes perfect sense. I'm not actually sure if the neurotoxin kills you, there isn't any timer present in the map so we don't know. But at the end of the map we see some pillars collapsing and reach a small corridor, music fades, end of map. A bit of a shame no character commented to give us a clear conclusion, but I understand it's supposed to be a slice of a story, not a full thing. Overall, the map showcases a lot of the process of the construction and use of arm panels. We explore a variety of environments, we see some nice examples of lighting, and a few more detailed environments like that one office. Generally, a lot of the rooms feel a bit too boxy and have fairly minimal decoration. Most of the rooms we are able to see the black floor. The gameplay is mostly just portaling about, but we have a few puzzles too. Overall, I'd say the gameplay has just enough going on that it isn't just walking simulator style gameplay. But this map's most notable element is its story. We're introduced to two characters, good guy and bad guy. The story mostly consists of good guy and the player exploring the factory with the threat of bad guy being hinted at, although perhaps not treated too seriously. The writing itself has a few standout moments, but often is fairly simple, feeling like it follows the trend of many Portal fan game tropes. But its inclusion is still very unique, and I'm happy to see mappers experiment with something like this for a competition map. If you enjoyed making this map and coming up with characters and your story, I definitely encourage you to keep refining your skills, and maybe you'll be making a mod one day. But with all that said, that's why the Old Assembly gets the award for the best story. Next up, the map for the best environments goes to Toxin by Boycell. This map, as the name suggests, is themed around the creation of neurotoxin, and this map shows off some excellent environments with a huge amount of variation. We start off in a concrete hallway and then progress into this area overlooking a conveyor.
I was going to kill you fast.
We get a line from GLaDOS suggesting this map takes place during some escape from GLaDOS. We move into a very detailed office area, press this button, then we enter this airlock, which has its own neat little sequence attached to it. Then the door opens and we get the in-game title drop, and we are introduced to the main control room for this factory. But right now everything is turned off, but if we follow these lights we can find this power switch next to this portal gun. Then we leave and the lights are back on and we hear GLaDOS talk.
You were busy back there.
although her laugh overlaps with her other line, and overlapping lines is actually quite a common occurrence in this map. Normally using choreographed scenes to start the next line, I use the on completion output, so the next line is played when the previous one is completed, but it seems a different technique was done here. But looking at the room itself, there is a lot to praise about it. I love the structural design of it, how the ceiling is at an angle and the same with the large window. I like the usage of metal trusses and structural supports in the ceiling, all the ducts and lights and how some of the lights are broken, all the little details for the cubicles with each one being unique. There's even a little Easter egg with my name on this wall. The outside area also offers a lot, even though it is just a backdrop. There is also a lot of usage of custom assets. I've talked about custom assets before. Generally, I tend to avoid spamming assets not from Portal 2, mainly as it's very easy to end up with something that doesn't feel like Portal. But I'd say this map is overall pretty good in its execution of it. Some places they fit perfectly, like these orange walls and spotlights blend quite well, I'd say, but these metal models from Nuke from CSGO feel weirdly shiny compared to their surroundings. We also have the usage of skeleton models and blood around the place, which is very unconventional for a Portal map. I would like to hear more from the creator on why they chose to add that, but it does feel more used for world building than horror, implying all these people died here due to some neurotoxin leak. Now, one last thing I will say about this section is that whilst I was trying to look at the cavern, I ended up jumping up here and discovered that you can get stuck in this spot. Now, continuing with the map, all the buttons don't do anything except for this one on the left, which opens a door behind this metal panel. I'm not entirely sure why the mapper has included these metal panels. If I were to guess, I'd say that it was an optimization feature, although they could have just used the airlock approach to corridors and used area portals instead, which I know they used elsewhere in this map. But moving on, we enter this area filled with skeleton turrets and a bunch of large pipes in the middle. At the bottom of this room, we can see what looks like some cavern with a liquid at the bottom. I can't be 100% sure what the intention is, but it seems like the pipes are extracting a toxic liquid, and that liquid will be later processed as an ingredient of the neurotoxin. Commenting on the visuals, the room is a very different aesthetic to the last one, still showing lots of detail and care throughout, although one thing I will highlight is that with all the usage of external assets and particularly all of this concrete and brick, this room does feel like something more out of Half-Life 2 than from Aperture, which I'm not sure if that was the intent or not. Anyway, the puzzle in this area is to hit these buttons and flick some switches, all while dodging the turrets. When we complete the task, these pipes connect and we can return to the main control room. Now we can move on to the next room, which feels a lot less polished than the others. I'm not sure if this was a time constraint issue or if this room just didn't click the same way, but it feels less detailed in comparison. Like if we look at the ceiling, this duct feels odd as it clearly clips with these pillars, and if we walk over to this fan we reach an invisible wall. There is still a lot to praise here, it just feels notably different from the rest of the map. But anyway, now we have a puzzle to solve. It seems quite clear that we're supposed to fling ourselves using this panel to get to the office, but the issue is in finding how we fling ourselves across. Looking around the room, there's no clear portal surfaces. But then I remember the other button, the main bit, which actually shoots a neurotoxin out when you press it. I mean, it seems crazy if that's strong enough to shoot us, but what else could that be for? It even has a portal surface above it. Surely I've got it.
And nothing. Alright, can't blame me for trying.
So then I go back and see if I missed something. Still no portal surfaces. I found my username again though. Maybe there's something in the other section. Yeah, that's gotta be it. Oh, the door's closed. So then I spend ages looking around, appear into the room and see a whiteboard talking about a fan next to a conveyor. Oh, the fan? Yeah, I thought that looked weirdly close to ground level. Maybe that's able to help launch me. Oh, no, the invisible wall. Now, it turns out the trick is you do have to use that neurotoxin vent from earlier, but the thing is, it only triggers if you jump at the exact same time, which I know isn't the only way to do it, having made weird catapults myself. Maybe the thought process is that a jump would help build momentum, and if that's the thought process, you're probably overthinking it, and that also requires that a player thinks the exact same way. I'm actually quite impressed I managed to figure that out. I could completely see a world where I just never thought to jump, and instead had to ask the creator what to do. Weird solutions like this is what can drive away players from a genuinely good map. I've had some weird solutions in some of my maps before, notably my Sunburn maps, which are cancelled maps, and those have some really weird solutions, and it does reflect in the stats that less people are finishing the map. But anyway, once we reach the room, we can then press the button which activates the turrets, forcing us to hide behind some boxes to reach the power switch. And activating that kills the turrets and activates the conveyor. The conveyor then carries these barrels of some flammable substance. I initially thought it was a neurotoxin ingredient, but if we watch we can see the barrels being pushed by the fan. Then I remember the whiteboard which says the barrels get pushed to the neurotoxin tanks, so we're loading the neurotoxin tanks with flammable barrels. As to why Aperture designed it this way, I don't know. Moving on, we can now press the button in the main control room, which GLaDOS doesn't like. and the door opens. And if we head over there, we can get a custom cutscene, which I think is done quite well. Now things are shaking, we hear alarms and we have to run. We're going back the way we came, although this time things are a bit more wrecked. And then we reach the end of the map. Now one massive drawback to this map, not apparent through this video, is the installation process. You can probably tell this map uses a lot of custom content, so much so that when the mapper tried to pack the map, it went over 500 megabytes, which is too much for them to upload it to the Portal 2 workshop. The alternative the mapper came up with was publishing the map without the custom content and having us download it separately and install the files. For workshop maps, this is a massive problem. For the majority of players, they just want to click and play. No searching through files and installing things through external links. Making that a part of the map is a major deal breaker, which we can see reflected in the map's performance in the workshop. 500 megabytes for a packed map is a huge amount and suggests that you are either using too much or using unnecessarily high quality textures when you didn't have to. I mean, let's look at other content on the workshop. Springtime by Toxin looks like this, a huge amount of custom content, and sits at about 290 megabytes. The Midas exhibition by Evelyn Incarnate looks like this and is only 128 megabytes. And here's a more recent example, Aperture Expo by Almighty Kel, it looks like this and it's only 96 megabytes. My point is, Toxin being over 500 megabytes while maps like these don't even come close do show that this is down to a lack of consideration when using custom content. Now I would personally recommend keeping custom content to a minimum. For example, you don't need a custom texture for a random concrete ceiling. Portal 2 has plenty. I would also recommend trying to stick to Valve content if possible. Stuff ported from Half-Life or CSGO will be much better optimized. When you're using your own stuff, try to keep your textures at either 512 by 512 or if it's a very important texture, 1024 by 1024. Personally, for the Portal 2 workshop, I see no reason to go as high as 2048 by 2048. But overall, this map follows the story of the subject escaping GLaDOS and destroying the neurotoxin factory. We have a few puzzles, mostly in the style of finding the button, but we also have a section involving a turret battle and one involving a gas-propelled jump, which I personally thought was absurdly tedious to figure out. And we've also got the issue of the map size bloating. But the map demonstrates some brilliant environment work. The main control room in particular is extremely detailed and thought out, and becomes a very memorable feature of the map. The map has good use of sound design with music cues when you enter a room, or a range of sounds during a sequence like the airlock. It's a shame something like the jump launch and the file size bloat exist, as otherwise I could see this being a massive workshop success. But as it is, it's actually not gotten much exposure. But with all that said, that's why Toxin gets the award for the best environments. And finally, the award for the best all-round map goes to Cube Assembly Line by Geo. This last map focuses on the construction of cubes, as the name suggests. Now let's get into it. We start off in an office area in a factory. Overall this area is pretty nice. There is some nice usage of lighting. Looks like the map has used some point spotlight entities to produce a glow from the lights, which can work well, although there are some caveats, as this entity is made for lights with a small light source, not a strip. This becomes noticeable if you look from certain angles. You can see the effect can look unnatural. So I would advise against using them for these kind of lights, and stick to using NV sprites and tone mapper settings which can produce a similar effect without looking odd from certain angles. Anyway, I think the lighting does do a good job at creating the mood, and has a very clear cold theme. I do think that the light should be extended to the floor, as the floor is quite dark. Generally, if you want darkness in a room, you make the walls and ceiling darker, not the floor, but it's thankfully not so extreme that visibility is too massively impacted. The rooms are pretty detailed with plenty going on, although they've included this strange pattern on the floor with 3 aperture logos inside each other. I'm not entirely sure why. This feels like a very irregular design decision. This map tends to feature aperture logos on the floor quite a lot. Personally, I don't think Aperture would put their logo all over the floors, especially not in a random factory, but I'll move on for now. This room also features a camera, which sets up the idea that you're being watched quite nicely. And there is also a bright red button which stands out against the blue room, drawing your eye, which I feel works quite well. Press the button and the factory on the other side is revealed, and the music kicks in. I think this is a pretty good little sequence. I would just point out that there is no sound from the button, nor does it actually get pressed inwards. But apart from that, I'd say it's pretty well done. Now the door is unlocked and we can progress forward. Outside we can find these conveyors, carrying broken up cubes to be incinerated. This is actually a custom model from the mapper, and I'd say these do work very well to convey scrapped cubes without looking out of place against other models, so well done with that. The environment for this area is decent, the shape is pretty cuboid and the decoration is fairly simple with the arms and varied wall textures. It's still an effective enough environment for the purpose of the map, although could do with more light in certain spots. One fairly notable problem for me would be that we don't hear any sounds from the conveyor nor the incinerator. The room is fairly silent besides the music. Next we have to go to this door in the corner, which could do with the light next to it to signal it's the way to go. But anyway, on the other side is another office area, which looks fairly similar to the last one. So my points for that one carry over here, both the good and the bad. This time we have a little office to the side. It's a fairly simple room, but it does have some nice desk decoration. It's also got this disc we can pick up, but I'll get back to that later. Moving on, we come to this junction with two ways to go. One way is collapsed, although the other end is lit up using a contrasting light colour which draws our eyes. And because the surface is portable, it does suggest we can go this way later, which I think is some nice level design work. Going right, we flip a switch to enter this new area. This section appears to be some kind of observation area for a demonstration involving faith plates, portals and an incinerator. This area is also in a slightly different style to everything else. Again, I'd point out how it feels very cuboid, and I think the transition from seating area to demonstration area is a bit awkward. It might work better with handrails, a wider seating area, and potentially push the demonstration area back further, as it does feel very tight moving around it right now. But apart from that, I'd say it does do a good job at conveying the environment it needs to. Like, I'm not questioning what this is. It is pretty clear, and there is still some effort put into detailing the whole area. Next, we pull the lever and this area activates, giving us an orange portal. Although it's a shame that there isn't much usage of sound here. The lever doesn't make a noise, nor does the fan. Another thing is we don't get to see what the demo would be. Possibly a cube would drop from this pipe, get launched through the portals and land in the incinerator. Although it's technically not entirely needed for the map, it still seems odd to include all of this if it's not usable. Interestingly, if you drop a camera in the incinerator, it detects it. You hear a noise and this sign turns into a tick. Although I'm not sure if this is an Easter egg or a cut feature, but either way it doesn't seem to do anything else. Nearby to here we can also find the secret area you can portal into, where we can find a little radio Easter egg, which I think is a nice little touch. But continuing on with the map, we're now able to portal over to the other side of this hallway. We enter this hallway with windows into a larger behind the scenes area filled with cubes being carried across rails. This hall also features these numbers. Now in the last competition, this map had an Easter egg where some numbers on a wall corresponded to letters in the alphabet, which spelt out my username. And here they've done it again. This side says Seaside, and this side says Portal. But moving forward, the door is blocked, but the window is smashed open so we can jump through that and enter the behind the scenes area. When we land out here, we can immediately start hearing this loud gunfire coming from this door. Approaching it, we can find it's broken, but on the other side we can see two turrets shooting at cubes. Now whilst I do like setting up a destination you'll be going to later, I find this problematic because this gunfire can be heard constantly and it's very annoying. Might work better if they are only shooting when you got close to the door, but then they were disabled when you backed away, which would solve the problem of the constant gunfire without removing the ability to observe it early on. But if we head through the working door, we can enter this new office area, which is in a different style to the last, which is nice to see. And again, there is a good amount of detail. These computers have these flickering lights. Whilst it's definitely a nice touch to give computers these dynamic lights, I'd say that the rate at which they change is way too quick. Some more delay would really help, as currently they're quite distracting. And also, for the record, this is what this room sounds like. Moving forward, we enter this room with a projector telling us to insert a disc. So like in co-op, we have to search the room for the disc. One detail I like about this room is how the lights near the projector are all turned off, but the ones at the back are on. I'm assuming this is intentional, as that feels very realistic, as typically lights make seeing a projector harder to see. Plus that side of the room being darker does make that board stand out more from a level design perspective. I thought it was a cool little detail. Once we get the disc, it will play a little video sequence just like in co-op, and a nearby door will open. Although there's another Easter egg here. If you brought that disc all the way from the start through the map to this point, you are able to play that disc, which instead plays the Portal 2 trailer, which I think is a fun little Easter egg. We move through some more halls and then we end up in the room by those turrets. Here we can see it's quality testing for the cubes, making sure they can withstand turret gunfire. Although one issue I have is that we never see any cubes fail. It would be nice to see the rare one break apart or explode, just to make it even clearer what this place is for. I'll also note that multiple times during making this video I had a crash which comes from too many entities being made, which likely comes from all the various tracks and conveyors spawning various props. So make sure you're killing everything that is not being shown and you don't go overboard with too many entities at once. But back to the map, if we continue exploring this room we can find a Portal 1 style elevator. Once inside, the gunfire finally stops. And then we arrive at another concrete hallway like the others. At this point I do feel like pointing out that this style is feeling a bit repetitive by this point. Generally for an exploration map you want your different environments throughout the map to feel very different. If you enjoy making primarily test chambers, maybe you don't think about this as much, but exploration maps thrive off of each new location feeling unique. A great example is something like Portal 2's BTS 3, where you explore the turret factory which features many distinct locations, all while remaining in one factory. Next we have this cube scanner section, which feels a lot like a remake of the turret scanner from Portal 2, although here these faulty cubes unfortunately weren't really set up. Anyway, the solution is quite similar to Portal 2's. Take the cube out and grab a new one as it's thrown towards an incinerator, although here we're after a pristine cube, not a faulty one. After finishing it, GLaDOS congratulates us, which reveals that this whole time we seem to have been helping GLaDOS repair the cube factory. I understand that mappers have to work with just the lines that exist for Portal 2, but it's a shame that this specific story wasn't set up earlier. Continuing forward through these returning concrete holes, we can find a test chamber to end the map. It's a simple puzzle that makes use of cubes, which is good to see as those are the theme of the map, although this test does involve a soft lock if you leave both cubes at the top of the room. But upon solving, you enter an elevator shaft and beat the map. Overall, this map explores a cube factory, showcasing incineration of broken cubes, cube quality testing, and cubes being transported throughout Aperture. It misses out on showcasing construction of cubes, but the theme is still very consistent. The map offers plenty of exploration, and through some level design tricks, the goal forward is conveyed for the player typically quite well. The environments shown off do well to convey what the mapper needs them to convey, some locations showing lots of detail. I particularly like the start, although other areas feel quite cuboid and I feel like they're missing out on a lot of lighting work, like the cube scanner area. Whilst the concrete halls worked for the start, by the end when we had seen them several times over, they were feeling quite repetitive, and could be swapped for something of a different style. Unfortunately, sound design didn't really feel like it was given full consideration, with some sections feeling weirdly quiet and other sections had those gunfire sounds annoyingly blaring. But overall the map offers a solid all-round experience while staying consistent to its theme. It was definitely tricky comparing this against Toxin, which did have much more complex and detailed environments, but Cube Assembly Line had a much cleaner release and its gameplay felt more consistently intuitive throughout, which is why Cube Assembly Line gets the award for the best all-round map. So that's the conclusion of the competition. You can play these maps for yourself on the Portal 2 workshop, the link is in the description, and you can let me know in the comments what you thought of the maps. And I invite any of the mappers to leave a comment sharing any details about the maps I didn't mention or ask any questions you have for me about them. To be a part of the next competition, all you have to do is join my Discord server and keep an eye out for announcements. The link is in the description. Now my next competition is going to be quite different. Rather than competing on different maps, mappers will be working on the same map, and they will be judged on their individual contributions. Each mapper will have the map for 1 week to work on, then it will be passed on to the next mapper. I encourage all types of mappers to get involved, both professionals and beginners. Anyone can make a big or small contribution depending on how much time you can give. I'll be giving a full brief of the competition soon on my Discord. But that's all from me. See ya.